There are a whole lot of rent versus buy calculators out there, especially lately with the New York Times, where they are talking about how much better it is to rent versus own. And being an avid purchaser of homes over the last 30 years, I wanted to share some insight as to these buy versus rent calculators, because let's face it, you want to make sure you're making the right decision for your family. So let's take a look at the numbers. First of all, we're going to make some assumptions, which nobody likes to make an ass out of you and me. So we're going to make some assumptions, and they're going to be different for every market. And if you want a rent versus buy analysis done for your specific market, I'm your girl to run those math for you. So at the end of the video, I will have my contact information if you want to know, is renting versus buying right for me and my family? Because I'm a very transparent person. And I will tell you, there are times in my life that I've rented, and there are times, most times in my life, where I owned. And those times that I rented for was for a very, very specific and planned out reason. So let's go over the assumptions. First of all, we're going to assume that the purchase price of the home is $500,000, that you put 10% down, which means that you borrowed $450,000. Now, this is at an interest rate of 7%. And by the way, most of these buy versus rent calculators do not take into consideration the possibility of refinancing later, which just means your interest would be less. And so we're not going to do that, but know that when you own a home, that also helps you financially. So we're not going to take that into consideration because we're not going to muddy the waters anymore. Okay. The other thing is, we're going to assume that your monthly payment is $4,354. And then we're also, that's tax and insurance in there too. And then also we're going to compare and contrast it to renting that property out for $3,651. And that is $703 cheaper, as you can see, than owning. And we're also going to have to take into consideration the fact that rents do rise. And we're also going to have to make a consideration that you're going to own the home for 9 years, which, by the way, is the average across the US right now. And we're going to increase the taxes by 2% per year, because just like rental increases happen, so do property taxes, unfortunately. And then we're also going to assume that you have a $2,500 per year repair cost of your home. Knock on wood, I have not had that happen in my newest purchase yet in the last several years. So fingers and toes crossed it stays that way. And then we're going to assume that when we do sell this house in 9 years, based on some average appreciation rates of 4.2%, that it's going to cost us 6% to sell the home based on the future value. Now, talking pure cash flow, meaning money going out of your checkbook in order to pay your mortgage or your rent. What is the difference? And when does that flip-flop from being worth it to buy versus rent on a monthly basis? Remember, renting can sometimes be cheaper than owning on a monthly. And when does that actually start to turn around? Well, in our same $500,000 assumption on the house payment of the just over $4,300 versus our rental, which is just about $3,600 a month, we're talking 5 years. At 5-year mark, you'll start to see the monthly payment shift from being less than owning, and now the renting is more. And the reason why is because, of course, the cost of renting continues to rise as your landlord continues to have to pay more property taxes and whatnot. You're going to bear the cost of all of those too. Now, that doesn't sound super sexy, right? You're like, wow, it takes me a long time before I actually start to see it wash out amongst each other. But that's not where real estate dollars are made, okay? Because at this point, we haven't even taken into consideration the tax benefits of owning versus renting. And of course, we have not taken into consideration the appreciation gain. So first things first, renting versus owning, after 9 years, you've gained cash flow of $5,364, which is not a lot of money if you really think about it. It's not a lot to shake a stick at in the grand scheme of spending $500,000 on a home. However, the big bad numbers come into play, which is really good if you're an owner and bad if you're a renter, and that is the tax benefits. And this has to make some assumptions that you're in a 22% tax bracket. Those numbers come into play, that the tax benefits of owning versus renting are $20,957 per owning the home over 9 years. $20,000. That is adding on to our $5,000 difference. That's nice. I love it. And then here's the big one, the appreciation gain. So assuming a 4.2 1% moving forward. Remember, we have a historical data of 4.2, but assuming 4.1 to be slightly more conservative, moving forward in the next 9 years, my house goes from 500,000 and I gain $219,702. Now remember, this does not take into consideration that I'm going to refinance at some point, because when rates get better, you can bet your booty I will be refinancing, because I don't want to stay at my 7% rate. Now, the other thing is that we also have to take into consideration the fact that when I bought my home, I had closing costs. When I bought my home, I'm then going to sell it. And when I sell it, there's realtor fees, right? So I'm going to take all this into consideration, like a holistic whole view of what the entire thing looks like and what is my new bottom line, how much I made versus renting. Let's go over that now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to see what is the grand total benefit of buying versus renting. Remember, because the grand total benefit of renting was $52,934 per our little chart. The grand total benefit of buying is $248,118, but we had to put some money down. We had our down payment and our closing costs. So the net result, the grand total net result, drum roll please, is $195,184. And this is truly taking all the cost of homeownership, all the cost of selling that home later on down the line, increases in property taxes, increase in repairs, increases in rental costs, etc. And you are going to still have a net result in your pocket that the New York Times net rental versus buying calculator does not take into consideration, of $195,000. And I will take $195,000 all day long versus renting. I hope this helps.